Nobody chooses to have anxiety because it's fun. But anxiety, bala batikh, like it's not real. Like nobody wakes up and is just like, wow, I really feel like having sweaty palms today. I feel like overthinking every single aspect of my life.
I guess the next thing is how and like what can we do to start tackling this anxiety now that we might understand a little bit better where it came from or why we're feeling it.
Anxiety is a very, very normal part of life. What does your phone usage look like? If you are checking your phone first thing in the morning, the first thing you do is you go to Instagram, you go to TikTok, you check your emails, you check your iMessages. It's like opening your head, taking out your brain, putting your brain in the deep fryer, deep frying it for like a good 20, 30 minutes, or let's be real, for most of us, it's like 3 hours. And then you put your brain back in your head and you're like, wow, I really can't focus.
Salam everyone, welcome to OPPC's podcast. My name is Eman Qasmieh, and today we're going to be talking about managing stress and anxiety during and after Ramadan. Joining us on this discussion is Sister Mayce Hassan. Mayce Hassan is a licensed therapist who has worked in all levels of care, including inpatient, partial hospitalization, and outpatient programs with various mental health disorders. She also serves as OPPC's mental health advisor for volunteers, and she's the speaker of Balanced, which is a monthly program that explores problems of the dunya from both psychological and Islamic perspectives. Additionally, she's part of Project Taqwa, which is a Muslim mental health advocacy organization. All that being said, I personally know Mayce Hassan as my mentor from TNL when I was like 10 years old. So
That is my favorite thing on my resume. That's all you need to know is that I
thanks.
used to do TNL. I'm
Yeah,
an
there we
OG.
go.
Alhamdulillah.
It's my favorite thing on your resume too. But Mace, we are seeing like a big uptick in anxiety, just like overall in the general public. And so I kind of want to set the stage with you about
Mhm.
what is anxiety, and then also in your own opinion, why would you say that there has been such an uptick in general these days?
Yeah, absolutely. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. We begin everything that we do by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and sending our salawat upon Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Say sallallahu alayhi wasallam every single time that you hear his name. Thank you so much for having me, Iman. So excited to be here talking about a topic that I still don't feel like we touch base on enough. And I still feel like it's still considered a pretty taboo topic. Anything in general, when it comes to mental health, we're getting there. We're getting a little bit better, but at the same time, still have so much progress to make. When it comes to anxiety, first of all, yeah, let's start by acknowledging what a long year it has been. It has been a long year. There's so much that has happened to us from, the last Ramadan to now being in the month of Ramadan, or in our case, we are 24 hours away from it. Allahumma ballighna Ramadan. So much has happened in the last year individually, for people in terms of like family and friendships and marriage and school and work, just so many areas of our life that we feel like things might have gone wrong. And there's just so much that we've gone through collectively as well with our brothers and sisters around the world. Specifically, we know with our brothers and sisters with Gaza, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant them ease. Just so much direct trauma, so much acute trauma, so much chronic trauma, so much secondhand trauma that we've experienced. How could we not be anxious? I guess that's kind of a way to start it, right? It's like there are different ways to navigate anxiety, there are different ways to manage anxiety, but with everything going on in our lives individually, collectively around the world, how could we not feel a certain degree of anxiety? And, I'll start by saying that anxiety is a very normal part of the dunya. The really awesome thing about Jannah when we make it, inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all the highest level of Jannah without hisab. But the awesome thing about Jannah is that you're not going to feel anxious and you're not going to feel sad. And all of these very normal human emotions that we feel in this world are not going to be a thing in the next world. But as we are here, we are in, like I said, the dunya meaning the lowest world. And when you're in the lowest world, there are going to be trials. And sometimes that trial is feeling like you have anxiety and it is experiencing anxiety, whether that be, just kind of normal day to day anxiety or having it become a little bit more chronic, a disorder when we consider it to be something tends to interfere with your day to day life. And so I'll start by defining that as nobody is going to get through life. Nobody is going to get through this dunya without a certain degree of anxiety. The prophets felt a certain degree of anxiety. You could look at the story of Prophet Musa alayhi salam. Like if we were to look at him, if we were to look at the DSM, we could diagnose him with generalized anxiety disorder because he felt anxious. And so it's a very normal part of life. It's something that's normalized in the Quran. We just want to be able to navigate those experiences and navigate those feelings in a way that is pleasing to Allah subhanahu ta'ala. In terms of like what is actual anxiety. So my favorite definition that I found of it so far is by this guy named Dr. Russell Kennedy, who has a book called Anxiety RX, which is a great book. I cannot recommend that enough if you're hoping to be able to brush a little bit more on this topic. He says that anxiety is not only anxious thoughts in the mind, but it is also the alarm in our body that goes off. And, it can be things like overthinking, it could be things like rumination, it could be things like avoidance. Those are all symptoms of anxiety. It could be something like hypervigilance, where it is like you're always waiting for the next threat. When is the next bad thing going to happen? When is the next thing going to go wrong? People describe it as like waiting for the other shoe to drop. But people also really don't consider that anxiety lives in the body, and anxiety also looks like physical symptoms in the body. So that could look like sweaty palms, that could look like shaking, that could look like rapid heartbeat, that could look like feeling very on edge, like somebody could just call your name and you'll jump a little bit. It can also kind of look like almost like there's this siren that is always going off in your body, kind of like if you were to pass by an ambulance and those sirens are going off. A lot of us are walking around and we have that siren going off in our body. For some of us, and this is why if you ever go to therapy, the therapist will ask you about your childhood, because a lot of this can be traced back to childhood trauma, where a lot of us might have grown up with parents who didn't know how to regulate their emotions, in households that were very chaotic or very unpredictable, and you didn't really have a lot of stability. And so what you do as a child is you look around and you're like, oh my gosh, the adults in my life, these people who are supposed to be taking care of me because I'm not old enough to take care of myself yet, are not reliable, are not consistent. These people are not safe, therefore the world isn't safe. It doesn't always necessarily have to come from the household. This could look like having a really, really brutal Quran teacher, or being bullied in school when you were in grade school, or having a really bad experience with a sheikh. Just something happened in your life that made you feel like I'm not safe. And a lot of us still to this day, and this is again when anxiety tends to be a little bit more chronic, still are living in that constant state of alarm and that constant state of alert. And it can be very, very debilitating, and it can be very suffocating. And so it is something that, we want to be able to treat. It's something we want to be able to learn to manage, because no matter how many heavy experiences that you've had, you can turn off that alarm. You can locate that alarm and learn new ways of coping, inshallah. I would also argue that as a believer, it's something that you have to actively go out of your way to try to manage, and try to heal as much as you possibly can. Again, not to say that you won't feel some degree of anxiety, because that's normal, right? So, like, for example, when we came in here, we felt a certain degree of anxiety. You guys don't even want to know what take we are on. Everyone just make dua for Zaid, our media team guy, because he has been very, very patient with us. May Allah grant him Jannah. Everyone say Ameen. But for us to come in here and feel like a certain degree of anxiety, that's normal, right? Is like I'm in a bit of a state of alarm, but now that I'm comfortable, I'm used to the bright lights, I'm used to kind of my brain's like, okay, this is what we're doing. And I've adjusted a little bit. I'm a lot more comfortable. So the alarm turns off. But if we have really, really big things happen to us, like, things in our marriages, things with our parents, with our children, just a lot of things that feel very unsafe and very unpredictable, then that alarm doesn't turn off the way that you and I feel like right now it turned off. And so, back to my main point, as a believer, if we don't turn off that alarm and we are in that constant state of alarm, and so much of our day is spent ruminating, and so much of our day is spent overthinking and just thinking worst case scenario, that can actually affect a lot of our concentration levels. This can cause a lot of cognitive problems. This can cause a lot of mood issues. This can affect your ability to concentrate. And as a Muslim, you got to be focused, because we got a mission in this life. We got things to do. We've got salahs to pray and ayahs to memorize, and athkar to do, and people to treat well, and hasanat to get. And if we always feel like we're always on edge, if we always feel like I can't contain this anxiety, if we always feel like I'm always just waiting for the next bad thing to happen, and we're also feeling those physical symptoms too, of like that rapid heartbeat, of feeling very fatigued, just very off. This is a lot of stuff that can cause a lot of digestive issues, and really affect our body and our brain in so many different ways. Then that is something that can overall affect so much of our lives. It can affect our akhirah, it can affect our relationships, it can play a really huge role. And so, to kind of summarize, it affects us in so many different ways. It can affect us physically, mentally, emotionally. And so it's something that we always want to be trying to manage and get under control, inshallah. Again, not to say that we won't feel it at times, but just knowing how to manage it is key.
It's a really good point, because I think a lot of people think that anxiety just kind of lives in the mind, and they forget that there's like a real physicality to it too, and how it affects
Mhm.
people. But I guess my next question to you is what would you say to people who feel as if their anxiety is their own fault or it comes from like a lack of deen or a lack of iman? Or like even when you hear people or parents say to kids, like, like just get over it or stop overthinking, or I guess like how would you explain all of that to
Mhm.
someone?
Yeah, this is still a real problem in our community for Muslim clients that I work with and non-Muslim clients of parents just saying like, get over it. Or in the case of a Muslim, like you should just go pray or you should just read Surah Al-Ikhlas 10 times and then everything will be fine and everything will go away. Or, bala anxiety, bala batiyakh, like it's not real. And I always tell parents first and foremost is that you invalidating the anxiety is not helping at all. If anything, this is something that can make a person really start to doubt themselves and feel like, okay, well, I'm feeling something in my body and I'm feeling something in my mind, but you're telling me it's not real. Well, now I feel like I can't trust myself. What's real and what's not. And I always tell parents too, and just people in general who are struggling with anxieties, that nobody chooses to have anxiety because it's fun. Like nobody wakes up and is just like, wow, I really feel like having sweaty palms today. I feel like overthinking every single aspect of my life. I feel like it's really hard to get out of bed today because I just feel like it because it's just fun to stay in bed and not want to tackle on any of my responsibilities. Anxiety is not fun. Anxiety is debilitating. Anxiety sucks. Anxiety ruins relationships. Anxiety ruins lives. No one is saying I'm anxious or no one is saying I have anxiety and it's ruining my life or it's a really big part of my life because they feel like it or because they just, a lot of times we assume they just want attention. People are saying it because there are actual situational and environmental factors that are causing that anxiety. That person has had a series of experiences that is making them feel anxious. So people are typically 90% of the time not being dramatic. It is something that is real for them. And for you to invalidate that is just something that makes it worse because when people are feeling anxious and when people have all those symptoms that we're talking about, what they really want more than anything is a safe container to be able to express those emotions. In fact, people typically suppress emotion and just bottle everything up because they didn't have spaces where they feel like it was safe to be able to release them in a really healthy way. And so, yeah, no one is typically doing it for attention. And then when it comes to Iman, I think this kind of ties back into what I was saying earlier. Anxiety is a very, very normal part of life. Allah doesn't tell us if you are a practicing Muslim that anxiety or depression or sadness or anger or all these human emotions that we feel are going to go away. You could, pray tahajjud and qiyam and your 5 daily prayers, and you are on it, and you can still wake up in the morning and still feel fearful at times of what's going to come. You can still feel hurt over what has happened in the past. Islam doesn't mean that you are not going to feel any pain. Islam is going to help you navigate through that pain in ways that are healthy, right? It doesn't mean that there aren't going to be any storms, but Islam and having a relationship with Allah and having a relationship with the Prophet, ﷺ, having a relationship with the Quran, doing your athkar, doing your dhikr, those things are going to ensure that you are not going to drown to the bottom of the ocean, but the storm is still there, but you are still finding ways to stay afloat. And so the two can coexist. The two very much will coexist in this world. And you know what? Us telling people that what we're doing is not enough. And I'm not saying you can't give nasiha and that you shouldn't remind people of, hey, if something is wrong with your life, look at your salah, look at your Quran, look at where you stand with Allah. But that shaming of like, oh, you're not doing enough, or oh, just rely on Allah and that's it, and not giving people space to feel and not giving people actual guidance is something that can actually push people away from Allah because people are like, okay, well, I'm praying and I'm reading Quran and it's not quote unquote doing anything for me. And so that's something that can make people feel like, oh, well, this is not working because this person is telling me that I'm not doing things properly, even though I might be giving it my all. And so just being able to validate that, like Allah validates that. Allah puts stories of prophets and tells us about their anxiety in the Quran, that fear that they have felt, that I don't know what's going to come next, to validate those experiences for us. So who are we to invalidate that for somebody else? Remind people of Allah. I'm not saying don't remind people of Allah. And there's so much healing in Quran and there's so much healing in Salah, but to tell somebody that they are wrong for feeling a natural human emotion, if they would just do those things, that no bueno.
That makes a lot of sense. And you tackled like the relationship between basically like our iman and anxiety, but then like Ramadan comes around and I think people feel even more anxiety. And like even just speaking from personal experience that comes from like you feel like you're not going to be able to do everything that you can, you're not going to reap its full benefits, you're not going to be able to really increase your ibadah the way others can. And so I guess like what's your take on why we're feeling so anxious about Ramadan in specific.
Yeah. I think it's important first and foremost to talk about the fact that you are anxious because you care. You are anxious about performing well during Ramadan, of doing the best that you can because you are invested in your akhirah, and that is a very good thing. If you were nonchalant about it, that would be a problem. We'd be concerned about that. But you care about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you care about your relationship with the Quran, you care about inshallah getting into the highest level of Jannah, and that's great. But I think an element of it is the fact that a lot of us are going into Ramadan very underprepared. We feel very underprepared. We feel like I've been slacking for so long. Some of us may feel so far from Allah, so far from the Quran, so far from the deen that it's like, I don't even know where to start. And some of us might be going into the month not even feeling worthy of being able to make it to the month. And so we might be feeling like, hey, like I don't belong here, or hey, I haven't prepared enough to deserve this. Which is not the case at all, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy is vast. And no matter how much you feel like you have strayed away, no matter how far you have been, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always waiting there for you with open arms. And, us, inshallah, being able to make it to Ramadan is living proof of that. I think also a part of it comes from a lot of us have a really, really deep, on a day to day basis, not just when it comes to Ramadan, but we have a very deep fear of failure on a regular basis. So many of us are walking around so overly conscious of ourselves, replaying the mistakes that we have made in our heads over and over and over again, shaming ourselves for being human and making mistakes the way that every single human being has, except the Prophet ﷺ, and just not accepting being human. And I'm not saying that doesn't mean that we shouldn't hold ourselves accountable for mistakes, but at the same time, a lot of us are walking around and we lack so much self compassion. We are harder than ourselves than anybody else is. And we have that fear that I feel like I'm not really succeeding a lot in a lot of areas of my life. Maybe your relationship with your parents isn't great, your spouse, your children, maybe you're not doing too well in your job, maybe you're not where you thought you would be at in life. And so when that happens, people feel like, "Oh, I'm a failure." And then Ramadan comes and there is this pressure to perform because the rewards are so great. I mean, so many people are going to be saved from the hellfire because of Ramadan. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us amongst them. But there's a lot of pressure that people might feel with that. And people might feel like I'm failing in so many areas of my life. I'm going to fail in this area of my life as well. But also, again, kind of going back to what I was saying before, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed us to make it to the month of Ramadan and has guided us to Islam because He sees something in us. And the smallest of things that we could do, the deeds that we put forth, are so precious to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I think it's also important to keep in mind is we're so used to having like a certain standard in life, right? You go to school, you either get an A, a B, a C, a D, not an E. You either get an A, B, C, D, or an F. And, we kind of have all these like specific things that we're trying to attain because we're always from childhood graded on the end result and not the effort that we put in, right? Like this is your final grade. But the beautiful thing about Islam and the beautiful thing about the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have a Rabb that is so forgiving and we have a Rabb that is so merciful. It is about the effort that you put in, not what the end result is. It is how invested you are in trying your best. And that's really what it is, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just wants us to try. And we are people, alhamdulillah, that have La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah in our hearts. And when you have that in your heart, you are already halfway there. We just need to add your efforts and we need to add the mercy that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will show us on the day of judgment combined. And so if you are feeling like you are failing in so many different areas of your life, knowing first and foremost that you need to learn to give yourself grace, right? Even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is the most merciful, He's the most forgiving. When we make mistakes, when we sin, we repent, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah, will forgive us in a manner where it's like it never even happened. And so knowing that wherever you are in your life, obviously we want to be taking active steps to repair whatever might need to be repaired in our life, but you are right where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you. And all you can do and all you can ask of yourself on a day to day basis is to just try your best. And as cheesy as it sounds, try to do better than what you did yesterday.
We tackled some of the definitions, kind of like why it's happening, why we're experiencing it. I guess the next thing is how and like what can we do to start tackling this anxiety now that we might understand a little bit better where it came from or why we're feeling it. How do we start to cope with it?
Yeah. A believer's always got to be in a state of reflection. And there's no better time to reflect than in Ramadan. Just to kind of do a check in with yourself. What went well this year? What went well between today and Ramadan and the last Ramadan? what went well in terms of my relationship with Allah, what didn't go well in terms of my relationship with Allah, what sins did I struggle to give up, what relationships did I neglect, what relationships do I feel like are not really serving me, and if anything, they might actually be harming me. We always want to be looking at like what worked for me and what didn't, what brought me joy, what brought me contentment, what made me feel really icky, what made me feel upset, what are the things in my control that I can do to change my life for the better.
All right, so to poke your brain for a second here.
Poke it.
Thanks. Would you argue, or do you think you hear people argue, I guess, that like reflecting in and of itself could induce more anxiety? Because like I'm thinking about it of like you look back and you realize like I didn't do, and it kind of goes back to that whole failure thing. Like I didn't do well in this thing, I didn't do well in that thing. And now all of a sudden you're anxious and ruminating and overthinking and replaying mistakes. So like
Mhm.
how do we not fall into that from the reflection?
Yeah. I think a really big problem is that we are not observers of our current state and we are not doing exactly what I mentioned, which is checking in with how you're feeling, trying to check in and reflect on your own actions and seeing what went well and what didn't go well. And the problem becomes is when we are suppressing so many different emotions, when we're feeling anxious and we are feeling upset or we're feeling depressed or angry with ourselves or with people or whatever it is that we may be feeling, and we just sit there and we go about our day-to-day life and we just smile and we pretend like everything's okay. And obviously, in some environments you have to do that, right? If you're going to release emotion or give yourself permission to feel, it has to be in like a safe space, a safe container. It has to be the appropriate time and place. But when we're suppressing all of that and we don't have a space where we feel like we can fall apart and we don't have a space where we feel like we can say I'm not okay or I'm struggling with this or I'm in denial about the fact that this is what's going wrong with my life, then I like to use the example of something they taught me in grad school, which is if you keep on suppressing your emotions, it's kind of like taking a soda can and you shake it and you shake it and you shake it and then you pop off the lid. What happens? Pieces of you, absolutely everywhere. And it will come out in moments where you don't want it to come out. So it'll come out with your loved ones. It'll come out. I always use the example of like the people at the coffee shops who are yelling at the barista for using oat milk instead of skim or 2%, even though oat milk sucks, but you still can't yell about it. But, it'll come out in very random places to random people. That anger, that anxiety, that sadness, all those emotions that you feel that suppressed are going to come out somehow, and we suppress it because it's scary for a lot of us. For a lot of us, even when we were children, if we were upset or if we were angry, if we cried, we were just told to kind of, shove it, shut it down, or told don't cry, especially if you were a boy, right? The boys are told more than girls not to cry. And so if you weren't given that space, then you're really not used to sitting with emotion. And then sitting with emotion becomes something very uncomfortable for you and something that you fear. And you know what? It is uncomfortable. This is a reason that a lot of people avoid going to therapy, even though they probably know that they should. But it takes a lot. It takes a certain level of emotional intelligence, emotional maturity for you to just be like, I'm gonna let myself cry, or I'm gonna let myself admit what I don't like in my life, what is going wrong in my life. But if you don't sit with that discomfort, then you're going to have more problems in the long run. This is when you're going to have that alarm just keep going off all of the time. That is when, again, that anger and that anxiety or whatever it is that you might be suppressing is going to come out in very, very random places at times where you don't want it to. And so I think it's important for people to know that sitting with uncomfortable emotions, sitting with your anxiety, talking to somebody about it, talking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala about it first and foremost before anybody else, and then seeking the help of other people because the help of other people is the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But feeling those emotions, it's not going to kill you. But you pretending like it doesn't exist and you pretending like you are not hurting and you pretending like your anxiety or your sadness or whatever has been coming up for you lately does not exist is going to make you feel like you're dying an emotional death. To get dark for a second, but that's how it feels for people. We have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Okay, so I want to touch on something that you touched on. You were saying how we should be doing this in like a space that is like a self, you said a safe contained space. And I guess what are examples of that we could be doing that reflecting?
Yeah. I think before we run to anybody else, we have to run to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is how that emotional intimacy is built with Allah. That is how that dependency on Allah is built. and no one can do anything for us if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't want them to. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what you are going through, and yet He still loves to hear from you. And it is through those moments of brokenness and through those moments of pain and through those moments of taking it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that our status is elevated. And like I said, we really start to build that intimate relationship with Allah that we want. And so this could look like talking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in your car, right? This could look like just having a casual conversation with Allah. Ya Allah, today was a hard day. Today, my anxiety was through the roof. Ya Allah, today this person pissed me off. Talking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the way that you would a best friend, and then asking him for his help and begging him for his help, whether that be you need a makhraja, you need an opening, you need something in your life to change, whether that be you feel like you are overwhelmed with emotion. Ya Allah, mend what is broken inside of me and make me feel whole again. Help me ease this anxiety because you are the only one that can ease it for me. I would also say that salah is a safe container. Whatever it is that you are feeling, this is why Allah gifts us with salah, so that 5 times a day, whatever it is that we're feeling, whatever it is that is weighing heavy on us, whatever it is that is stressing us out, we can raise our hands and we can say Allahu Akbar and we can say Allah is greater than everything that is stressing me out and everything that is causing me my anxiety. And we also know from the Prophet ﷺ that a person is closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when they are in sujood. Sujood is like a session. Sujood is like a therapy session. After you say Subhana Rabbil A'la 3 times, get it out. Whatever it is that you are feeling, whatever it is that is weighing down on you, talk to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala about it. And so I would say that just your dua and your salah and being able to do it through your Quran as well. Your Quran is a mirror to all of your brokenness. You anything that you have been through, there is somebody, there is a prophet, there is a story from somebody that came before us that is going to validate those emotions for you. And then, of course, as I said before, the help of the people is the help of Allah. We really struggle to ask for help. I think in general, just this emphasis in society of like be independent and do everything by yourself, but we're only human and we need each other. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us and wired us as social beings, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with asking for help. I think it takes a lot of courage and a lot of strength to ask for help, especially if you were so used to just doing everything on your own for so long and you didn't have a lot of people maybe to talk to and hold space for you to be able to push past the discomfort that you might initially feel when you open up to somebody is really really big. But this is how we heal, this is how we combat that sense of shame that we might feel, that fear that I am unlovable, that fear that I have so many flaws and so many mistakes that nobody is going to love me. And so when we put down the armor and we tell somebody what's actually going wrong with us, the shame gets smaller and we feel that relief, we feel like that weight is a little bit lighter because we are not carrying it on our own. And so when it comes to the people, obviously nobody's going to advocate for therapy more than I will, of just having somebody that is on the outskirts of your life is going to give you that unbiased opinion, and is just going to give you space to talk about whatever it is that you want to talk about. And it's something that's very freeing for people. Actually, a lot of the times people think that when they come in, we have to start with like some fancy technique, but actually, research shows that the most healing thing in a therapeutic relationship is just your relationship with the therapist and your comfort with the therapist and your comfort with just being able to say, "Hey, I'm struggling." And just the rapport that you build is something so healing because it is two people connecting with each other. So that's always an option. Inshallah, we'll mention some resources at the end for anybody that's interested in starting that. But then it could also just be somebody in your life that you trust. And I want to take the word trust and I want to put it in bold and italicize it and underline it because this really needs to be somebody who you feel like genuinely wants the best for me. It's so unfortunate, but it's becoming increasingly harder to find somebody that genuinely wants the best for you and is not going to feel a little bit of joy in the fact that you're feeling low. And so just making sure that it is somebody that I always call it like people that feel like an exhale to you, like people you see them, you feel like I can breathe. If I am broken, if it's the best day of my life, if it's the worst day of my life, this person is going to accept me and this person is going to listen to me. And, us being able to hold that space for other people is also something that's so important. I think a lot of the times, whenever somebody is venting to somebody else, I know I used to feel this way even when I like first started as an intern, like clients would be talking and I'd be like, I have to say the perfect thing. Like I have to sound so smart or I have to sound so comforting right now. But people, when they're venting and when they're looking to you to hold space for them, they're actually not waiting for you to say the perfect thing. They're not waiting for you to go into fixer mode and offer like 500 solutions to their problems. A lot of the times there is nothing we can actually do for somebody in terms of logistics when it comes to helping them with their problems. But people aren't exactly looking for that. They're just looking for somebody to listen. They're looking for somebody to go, that sucks. Like sometimes I've had sessions, Iman, where people talk for like straight 50 minutes and all I just do is nod and I go, mm-hmm, and I go, that sucks. And that must have been really hard for you. And that's something that's so healing for people. And so just making sure that it's somebody that you trust, and you will feel that relief. You will feel the magic of a relief of being able to tell Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and just being able to let yourself fall apart, right? Nobody has it together all the time. So stop pretending like you do.
I like what you said about bringing our problems to Allah first and then the people because like we talked earlier about like okay, like there's this like it's your fault
Mhm.
for that like anxiety, but then you have like the other like spectrum, like side of the spectrum where it's like I'm going to run straight to people and I'm not going to like think about Dean. And so like I like how you gave us like the middle ground with that and how to really like step by step tackle this.
Mhm.
But I guess on the note of tackling, is there any other I guess suggestions or pointers that you want to give?
Yeah, I would say that if you are feeling really down these days and you're just feeling anxious, you're feeling a lot of the symptoms that we talked about in your body, the overthinking, the rumination, I think it's also important for us to be able to reflect on our own actions and try to figure out how might I be actively playing a role in self-sabotaging my own life and causing these symptoms. And in Ramadan, there's so much emphasis on like leaving the sins. We want to fix the things that we are doing wrong. And I think that's so important to obviously consider year round, but especially now, because I don't think a lot of people realize that the more that you cross the boundaries that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put for you, and the more that you are drowning in sin, and obviously, right, none of us are perfect. We are all sinners. But if you are constantly engaging in acts of disobedience, if you are constantly living in this lifestyle of just disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, especially if you are engaging in a lot of major sins on a regular basis, where is the barakah in your life supposed to be coming from? Of course, you're going to feel anxious. Of course, you're going to feel depressed. You're living a life that is not pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You are living a life where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could be displeased with you. Where are you supposed to feel joy from? How are you supposed to feel content? And so you always want to kind of look at your life and be like, what role might I be playing in these symptoms that I'm feeling? What role might I be playing in causing my own sadness and causing my own anxiety? And even aside from like sins, I mean, I guess this could technically be considered a sin, but if you're going around and like for example, you're yelling at everybody, you're having all these outbursts, you're super aggressive, and then you go to bed at the end of the day after you've like yelled at everybody in your life, and you're like, wow, life sucks. I'm very anxious. Well, yeah, you're going to feel like trash because you're treating people like trash. Like, does that make sense? Like, the things that you do are going to impact your mood. The more that you are doing things that are pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you are constantly engaging in repentance, right? Because again, none of us are perfect, but we always want to be in a state of turning back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The more that you do that, the more barakah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to pour into your life, inshallah. And that could result in you feeling less upset and less anxious. The other thing is, I think it's also important to kind of pause, and this goes into the reflection that we were talking about, is to pause and kind of figure out where have you been in terms of the physical symptoms that we've talked about. A lot of the times when people have been living in a state of anxiety for a very long time, they get locked into what we call a stress response. And so there are a couple different ones. I'll get into them briefly, inshallah. The first one is one that people are pretty familiar with. It's fight or flight. And so you feel very angry, you feel very irritable, you feel very anxious, on edge. Your sleep might be interrupted, your digestion might be interrupted. And again, it kind of goes back to that. If someone says my name, I'll jump, always waiting for the other shoe to drop, living in that constant state of hypervigilance. The second one is called freeze. And this is when people tend to describe life as feeling not very real. Like I'm kind of, people have described it as kind of watching my life on the outskirts. It's as if I'm like in a movie, nothing feels real. People feel very numb. Sometimes people say this in therapy. I don't feel anything. I just feel completely numb. And I always tell people numbness is not an absence of emotion. Numbness is actually, I feel so much and I'm so scared what's going to happen if I actually let it all in. And so this is something that can cause a lot of people to procrastinate. This is when people might find it very hard to enjoy the sweetness of their worship or engage in any acts of worship at all. Life feels very slow. Life feels very you feel very out of touch with everything. And then the other one, and this is one that I think a lot of people aren't familiar with, it's called fawning. People know this as people pleasing too, which is when you are going around and you are taking care of everybody else's needs. You don't know how to say no to people. You don't know how to set boundaries with people. And I mean like healthy boundaries, not like boundaries these days where people are like, oh, like, this person crossed my boundaries. I'm not talking to them anymore. I mean like boundaries that actually, protect you and your physical health and your emotional health and your spiritual health. You're running around taking care of everybody else that you neglect yourself in the process. And in the case of a Muslim, this might actually lead to you neglecting your relationship with Allah and neglecting the obligations that He has for us. And I think for Muslims, especially, it's kind of hard to know when you're people pleasing or when you're just trying to be a good Muslim, because in Islam there's so much emphasis on, help people, and there's so much emphasis on kindness and character. It's one of the most beautiful things in our religion. But at the same time, you want to be careful because as much as we have to try to be the best versions of ourselves and help the people around us, Islam also is not a religion that promotes burnout. And so, yeah, those are typically the three responses people find themselves in. And so, kind of just taking a second to think, which one do I feel like I might be locked in? Is it one of the three, or do I feel good? Do I feel safe and secure? I feel like I feel healthy, as healthy as I possibly could. My physical health is feeling good. My mental health is feeling good. My relationships are good. Just kind of pausing and seeing what areas of your life you also might be neglecting. So, if you go to therapy, a good therapist is going to take a holistic approach and look at your life in all the different areas: your physical health, your mental health, your emotional health, your spiritual health. And we're going to look at the different areas and say, okay, what have you been neglecting? What areas need extra care? And so, kind of just pausing and just being like, how have I been? What stress response do I feel like I'm locked in? If I feel like I might be locked in one, and have I been taking care of myself? Have I been taking care of my mind? Have I been taking care of my body? Have I been taking care of my soul? Because it's all about awareness. A part of healing anxiety is awareness. We want to become aware of your patterns, aware of what you are doing right, and aware of what you could be doing better.
Okay, so you hit on something that I really want to dive into a little bit more, and you were saying that Islam is not a religion that promotes burnout. So I guess starting off, I guess what is burnout? Because I think a lot of the times, like people don't really know just how severe it is. And then the second thing to it is how do we help prevent it? Because people do experience it like during Ramadan. There's religious burnout, and then just in general, there's a lot of burnout. So what can we do to help tackle that?
Yeah. So burnout is kind of like your body's way of saying, stop, I can't take it anymore. This is when the things that used to bring you joy become very heavy. This is when just sending a text feels like an assignment. This is when life starts to feel very repetitive for people, very boring. They start to just feel very out of touch with who they used to be because they're so overworked and they are neglecting themselves so much. Typically, when people are feeling burnt out, the first thing they'll say is, I need a vacation. Like it's time to go to Umrah or it's time to go to Cancun. And I always tell people, vacations are great. They're like a breath of fresh air. They offer variety. But at the same time, you go on vacation for a week or two, your problems are still going to be waiting for you when you get back. Burnout means that you need a change in lifestyle, you need a change of habit or habits, and your life kind of needs to be revamped a little bit. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the different areas that I've been mentioning, right? The physical, the mental, the emotional, the spiritual, just how important it is for us to take care of each of those areas. And I'll start with the physical one, inshallah, right? We want to look at our routines. We want to look at the ways that we are treating our bodies. I know we're told from a young age, like, make sure you eat your vegetables, make sure you exercise, move your body, you sleep enough. And yet, so many of us are walking around completely undernourished, completely sleep deprived. And we think it's like, almost like it's cute. Like, yeah, I only slept like 5 hours last night. And we just run on like 5 cups of coffee and we don't eat foods that actually nourish our bodies. And then we're just like, why am I so anxious? Like, why am I overthinking everything? Why am I struggling to perform well on my day to day tasks? Why does my brain just feel like it's going to explode? Diet is something that can quite literally destabilize your brain. If you are not eating enough protein, you are not eating enough fruits and vegetables, you are not eating enough omega-3 fatty acids, you are not giving your body enough rest. This is something that's so important, you guys, is because we live in that hustle culture that we always have to be productive 24/7. We wake up and the first thing that we open on Instagram or TikTok is like people who are getting up at like 5:30 in the morning and working out. And, if you're that type of person, that's great, more power to you. But at the same time, like we need to slow down and we need to rest and we need to make sure that we are sleeping 7 to 8 hours every single night. We need to make sure that we are having 3 meals a day, that we, again, are are eating enough fruits and vegetables, that we are getting hydrated, you will see a huge difference in your concentration levels, in your relationships too, because you'll be less irritable and you'll be able to be more present when you are giving your body and your brain the foods that it loves. Making sure again that you are exercising, not over exercising, because that also tends to be a problem in society too, but just getting even research is showing that just 44 minutes a day is enough for your body. It doesn't even matter the type of exercise, whether that's weightlifting or Pilates or going for a walk, whatever it is that you like to do. It's just a matter of you being consistent with it. And this is so important for us as Muslims too, because again, if we are not taking care of our bodies and our concentration levels are being affected, and then we're standing there and we're like, oh, I just can't memorize Quran. And it's like, no, you can. Like, Allah didn't give this to you. He wouldn't have given you this book if He didn't know that you were capable of building a relationship with it. But you're not sleeping well, you're not eating well, you're over caffeinated, and then you're sitting in front of the Quran, and it's just like, wow, my brain just can't retain anything. And it's like, no, you did this to yourself, because your sleep is trash and your food is trash and your exercise is trash. And so people, I actually might be very surprised to see how much of their anxiety issues are resolved if you just start taking care of yourself physically, of like really just prioritizing healthy whole foods, making sure that you are getting enough rest, slowing down when you need to, like listen to your body, you guys. We do a lot of times in therapy when we do like different mindfulness exercises, we do what's called a body scan of just like from head to toe. I'm just going to see like, where do I feel tension in my head? Do I feel tension in my shoulders, in my stomach, in my jaw, in my feet, in my legs? And then just being like, okay, what am I doing in my life that might be causing that tension? It might be causing that pain. So making sure first and foremost that you are taking care of your body. Your body is an amana. Allah is going to ask you on the day of judgment how you took care of this body. And it is something that, again, you will see the world of a difference when you start getting that area and the other areas of your life under control. In terms of the mental and the emotional, I think we kind of already covered this before, right? Of making sure that we have safe containers, that we are expressing our emotions and regulating our emotions in ways that are healthy. There are so many different things I could talk about for this. Honestly, this could be a whole other podcast, but I'll just kind of focus on the ones that I think might be most beneficial to people. I think it's really important for us to monitor the thoughts that we have and pay attention to where most of our attention goes throughout the day, right? Of being more present. SubhanAllah, this is all intertwined with Islam, because Islam is presence. Islam is, hey, where's your attention? Let's reshift, let's refocus. Every person has an average of 70,000 thoughts a day. How many of those thoughts are you being optimistic about the future? How many of those thoughts are you thinking well of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How many of those thoughts are you ruminating about things, overthinking things, replaying things that have happened in the past, or worrying about things that will happen or you think will happen in the future? This is a very, very big problem. We want to make sure that we're thinking well of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We want to make sure that we are going into our lives every single day hopeful that I am right where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants me. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants the best for me. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has amazing things in store for me. Even the anxiety that I may feel, or even the pain that I may feel, is all khair. This is all stuff that inshallah is also wiping out my sayyats, my sins. And so it is all khair. We also want to make sure that we're not engaging in what we call like toxic positivity these days, where it's just like you're walking around, you're like, everything's great and everything's fine. And then you're kind of ignoring that pile of emotional garbage that is going on behind you. But just generally speaking, how often do you think well of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How often do you pause and really challenge the thought you have of like, how likely is the thing that I am afraid of? How likely is the thing that I am anxious about going to happen? Because this is a lot of where anxiety comes from, right? It's either like you're freaking out over things that have happened in the past and you keep reliving them over and over and over again. Your mind and your body are living as if the past is still happening, or it's the same exact thing with the future, right? That's the biggest thing for people. What if this happens? What if this doesn't happen? What if? And now you are also living as if you are in the future. You are completely emotionally paralyzed and you're disconnected from the present. And presence is something that is so important, Iman. The more present we are, the more engaged we are in whatever it is that we are doing, the safer we feel, the less anxious that we feel. Because when we are present, we are communicating to our body that we're okay, we're safe, we're not going to go to the past, and we're not going to go to the future. We are just going to be present with whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has for us today. And so, we have 70,000 thoughts again. how many of those thoughts are you thinking well of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how many of those thoughts are you grounding yourself in the present moment, right? So anytime you start to feel like you're running on autopilot, you're going through things very, very fast, just letting yourself know, like, I'm going to bring myself back to the present moment. I'm okay. I'm safe. Allah's got me. What is it that I can do today to help myself feel better? What is it that I can do today to feel closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to improve my relationships, to do all the great stuff that we were talking about before? And so just making sure that you're paying attention. Like when you start sinking, when you start going in that dark hole, just catch yourself and then find healthy ways to cope and find healthy ways to pull yourself out of that. The next thing that I'm going to talk about, and not everybody is going to like to hear this, but this is something that is so, so important, is paying attention to your screen time and monitoring your phone use. You guys, our phones are a huge part of the reason that all of our anxiety is going up. First of all, just staring at a screen stresses out the body. And I know this is something that's like we can't avoid it because now half of our lives are online, but there are so many things that we are engaging in that we don't have to be engaging in. The more that you are scrolling, the more that you wake up, especially first thing in the morning. Like I always tell people, try to give yourself a screenless first hour. I know it's hard. I know our instincts is like, oh, I've been, gone for like 8 hours. What did I miss? And who texted me? And what emails do I have to respond to? But I always tell people, and this is something that I always work on with clients, right? Like I'll ask people all the time, what does your phone usage look like? And what does it look like for you in the morning? Because the morning sets the tone for the whole day. And so I always tell people, if you are checking your phone first thing in the morning, the first thing you do is you go to Instagram, you go to TikTok, you check your emails, you check your iMessages. It's like opening your head, taking out your brain, putting your brain in the deep fryer, deep frying it for like a good 20, 30 minutes, or let's be real, for most of us, it's like 3 hours. And then you put your brain back in your head and you're like, wow, I really can't focus. Like Salah is so hard for me. Or not even just our acts of worship. We struggle to just be present with people. Like people are talking to us and we're in like a completely different world. We struggle to engage in a lot of hobbies that we might have liked to do when we were younger. Now it's a lot harder. People often tell me like I can't read books, I can't get through more than one page. Well, that is a result of your own doing because you are frying your brain. You are spending so much of your time, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us for all the time that we have wasted on our phones, all the times we could have been doing something else and we just chose to scroll on TikTok or scroll on Instagram or Snapchat or whatever. So much time that we waste. But this is something that is causing us a lot of anxiety. This is something that induces the alarm in our bodies. And so just making sure that when you start your day, first and foremost, do not check a screen. I know for some people, like with work, it might be a little bit hard, but just wake up earlier than you need to. Give yourself just 1 hour because you don't want to put your brain right into work mode just as soon as your day starts, because now you're just going to have full blown anxiety because you're thinking so many different thoughts and I have to do this and I have to do that. And, people are talking about life feeling like an endless to do list. But if you're waking up and you're just stressing yourself out with your to do list right away, then of course you're going to feel anxious. And of course you're going to feel sad. And of course you're going to feel all the things that we are feeling. And so, it is important for us as believers to make sure that we are using time wisely. Time is ticking. We've only got a limited time on this earth. And so we want to make sure that we're using it to the best of our ability. But there is a very, very good chance that your phone and the amount of hours that you spend on your phone is causing a lot of the symptoms of anxiety that you might be feeling, messing with your mental health, messing with your ability to connect with other people, ruining so many different relationships. And so making sure that we are reducing that screen time as much as we can. I know it's hard. This reminder's for myself before anybody else, but just making sure that you either, download those apps that lock your social media apps after a certain period of time. If you're working on something, you want to pray, you want to read Quran, you want to write a paper, you just have your phone in a different room, give it to somebody else. If you can't control yourself, just be like, I can't have it. Make sure you don't give it to me. And inshallah, you will see the world of a difference in your mood and your concentration levels and so many different aspects of your life.
So you hit on a lot of important things that I think like all of us really need to start reflecting and doing better about. But specifically when it comes to the physical aspects, I think a lot of us are probably going to close out of the video and think like, well, I can't fix all of it at once. I can't all of a sudden like 180 my life and start eating the three balanced meals and sleep 8 hours and work out for 45 minutes. And then Ramadan's coming. And so I have to
Yes.
increase my ibadah. So I guess where do we start? And how do we like start to do this in a way that we can now sustain this and we can, start to build and have like a healthy foundation to these healthy habits?
So we know from the Prophet ﷺ that the most beloved deeds to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are those that are consistent, even if they're small. When you are starting something out, obviously, when we read books about this stuff or we listen to podcasts, we start so empowered and we start with that burst of motivation. But it's important to make sure that we are starting small because whenever we are trying to incorporate something into our life, whenever we're starting to form a new habit, our brain and our bodies actually feel a lot of resistance. We're like, no, I don't want to do this. This isn't a part of what we do. This isn't a part of our routine. And so, in order for you not to overwhelm your brain and body with resistance, it's recommended that you start slowly and you start consistently, right? So, that could look like today I'm going to drink 2 extra cups of water. Today I'm going to read 2 pages of Quran, right? If you normally read one, building on from there. Today, I am going to incorporate vegetables into my lunch, right? Small but consistent steps. And the more that you do it, the more that your brain starts to take note that, hey, we are the type of person that eats healthy. Hey, we are the type of person that reads Quran. Hey, we are the type of person who reads or does whatever it is that you want to do. So it is recommended that you just kind of like look at whatever it is that you want to incorporate and starting small. And then the more that you do it and the more that you start to build that confidence of, hey, I can do this and this is a part of my life, then the more it'll become a regular part of your life. It's all about, and this is a really big thing with anxiety, it's all about learning to sit with discomfort, right? You feel discomfort that comes up for you, and you take deep breaths and you're like, I'm okay. And your body starts freaking out and your mind starts freaking out. And you're like, I'm okay. I can keep doing this. Because the more that you avoid something, the more the anxiety grows. Avoidance is one of the biggest symptoms of anxiety, right? For example, we talked about how when we came in here and we started this podcast and we came in and we saw all the bright lights, we're a little nervous, we're a little anxious. If we freaked out and we were just like, no, I can't do this. I can't ever, be in front of a microphone. I can't be in front of these bright lights. And we left and we didn't do this. Then our brain's like, okay, we're not the type of person that does podcasts. We're not the type of person, we're not the type of people who could speak. And so then our anxiety about it grows. But because we felt that initial anxiety, we felt that initial discomfort, and we continue to breathe through it and we push through it, well, now our confidence and our comfort with this has grown. And now we don't have as much anxiety about it because we were able to tolerate the discomfort. Expanding your window of tolerance is something that is so big. So just making sure you're moving slowly, making sure you're moving consistently, and emphasis on the slowly. This is something that's really important with anxiety. Is so much of anxiety is like everything that we do is so rushed, right? I make will do. I'm doing it super super fast. I talk to people and I'm like, oh, I got to go to this place and this place afterwards, or this is what's on my to do list. You're driving, you're like speeding super fast. The slower you go, the more regulated your nervous system becomes, the less anxiety that you feel. So slow but consistent steps. And as you are doing those things, giving yourself grace, giving yourself compassion, and praying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it easy for you.
So you talked about the small, consistent steps, but I think sometimes like we can be our own biggest enemy, and those small, consistent steps feel like we're not doing enough. So how do we tackle the feeling of not doing enough while also balancing all our responsibilities? And then even like a little more pointed is like within Ramadan too.
It's important to start off by remembering that we're never going to be able to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the way that he deserves to be worshiped. It'll never be enough. And that's not to make it feel like super disempowering or like what we're doing doesn't matter. It's just a reflection of how vast Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is and how great Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. The Prophet ﷺ tells us that if we were to stay in sajda from birth until death, we would still have some level of regret on the day of judgment. And so it's not a matter of like, am I doing enough or I'm ever going to hit this point where it's like, yeah, now everything's perfect and I'm good. And this is what feels like enough. It's just a matter of you trying. It's like we talked about before. I think it's important to keep in mind that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-wadud. He's the most loving and he loves us so much. And everything that we put forth, all the deeds that we put forth, even though they're so small in the grand scheme of things and in the grand scheme of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deserves to be worshipped, but we are the slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves us. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala appreciates the things that we do. But to feel like there's ever going to be this finish line, this point where it's just like I'm doing everything right and I've done enough, that doesn't exist. Again, it's just a matter of you always trying your best. In terms of like ibadah, and people struggle with this during Ramadan, right? It's like we have jobs and we have families and we have so many different things to tend to. And in an ideal world, we'd be, 17 years old and have minimal responsibilities and be able to do all the acts of ibadah that we want. So for everybody that's kind of struggling with that guilt of, I'm only getting a certain time of the day or certain times of the day where I get to engage in my acts of ibadah, keeping in mind too that all the responsibilities that we have can be an act of worship when they are done for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. We know that if we start anything with Bismillah, Bismillah is a reorientation of yourself. It is recentering yourself. It is giving what you are doing purpose. So if you are taking care of your kids during Ramadan, you are cooking, Ya Allah, I'm doing this for your sake to cook my family a nourishing, healthy meal. Please accept from me. Bam, that's ibadah. You're going to work, Ya Allah, I'm going to work for your sake so that I can make halal income, so that I can provide for my family, so that I can help people. Ya Allah, please accept from me. Bam, that's ibadah. And so the beautiful thing about Islam and the beautiful thing about the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is you can always be in a state of ibadah no matter what you're doing, right? Ibadah is not just salah and Quran and all the things that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has obligated on us, but ibadah could it could be anything. It's just a matter of you starting something for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then you are getting mountains of hasanat, inshallah, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts in Ramadan, that is all multiplied. And so it's important to keep in mind that even if it doesn't feel like it's something productive, it is productive because you are doing the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded you to do, and you are doing it solely for his sake, inshallah.
Okay, so I want to close off with you, Mace, and kind of just wrap everything up because you talked a lot about reflecting. You talked a lot about being productive. You talked a lot about recentering our intentions. But how can I use this Ramadan that's like right around the corner to help with that reflecting and to help heal from my past, so that way I can, this Ramadan can help recharge me for the upcoming year?
Inshallah, I'll answer it pretty generally because I think that this advice could also apply to outside of the month of Ramadan. But I would say that whatever goals that you have for yourself, the things that you say you want to do, all the promises that you make to yourself, keep those promises. One of the most healing things you can do for yourself is to just do what you say you're going to do. So many of us have such broken confidence, broken trust with ourselves, and one of the most healing things that you can do is start showing yourself that you're the type of person who does what you're going to say you're going to do. Show yourself that you are someone that can be trusted. Show yourself that you are somebody that is invested in their akhirah. Show yourself that you are somebody who is invested in your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Push through the discomfort. Discomfort is not going to kill you. When you feel that alarm going off, when you feel yourself ruminating, when you feel yourself overthinking, when you feel yourself doing all the very human things that we feel and all the very human things that we do, letting yourself know, I'm okay, I'm safe, and I'm going to breathe through whatever it is that I am feeling. I'm going to breathe through those sensations because the more that you do that, the more trust you build with yourself. And when you have that rock solid confidence that like Allah's got me and I got me and I'm doing the best that I can do with the resources that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me, that is one of the most healing things that you could ever do for yourself. And so do the things that you say you're going to do. Do the things that you know are going to improve the quality of your life that you've been putting off for so long. The next thing, and we touched base upon this a little bit before, but just to reiterate the importance of it, is just make sure that you are present with whatever it is that you are doing. Your mind is going to drift sometimes. Your mind's going to drift a lot, actually, right? But just making sure that you are bringing your attention back to the present moment. Whatever you are doing, you are immersed in what you're doing. When you are praying, when you are at Taraweeh, you are praying your qiyam, you're in your dua, you are just making sure that you are trying to focus on one thing at a time so that you don't overwhelm your mind, you don't overwhelm your body, you don't overwhelm your nervous system. You make sure that you are actively trying to be present so that you can actively communicate to your brain and body, hey, we are safe, right? Because this is coming from experiences that you've had before where you didn't feel safe. One of the most healing things is for you to bring yourself back to the present moment and then also make sure that you are taking care of yourself, doing the things that we talked about before, making sure you're taking care of your iman, you're constantly trying to grow your iman, making sure you're taking care of your relationships, making sure you're taking care of your body. A part of the problem and so much of the anxiety that we feel is that there are so many different areas of our life that maybe weren't taken care of before. Again, typically starting in childhood or when we were teenagers, just so many different ways that we neglected ourselves or people neglected us. And the cool thing about getting older and the cool thing about being an adult, there aren't a lot of cool things, but this is one of the cool things, is that you now have the capacity to take care of yourself in ways that maybe you weren't taking care of before. You are capable of taking control of your health. You are capable, obviously, with the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of having better relationships. You are capable of being able to engage in the hobbies that maybe you haven't engaged in so long. And you are capable of being able to make it to your ultimate goal of making it to the highest level of Jannah, inshallah. Just making sure that you go slow, making sure that, again, whatever it is that you are doing, that you are present with it so that you are not living in the past and you are not living in the future. And then I would also say that Ramadan is the month of hope, but then also keeping in mind too that the same Allah that exists in Ramadan exists outside of Ramadan. So many times we've been through so many different things, so many different hardships, so many different trials, so much heaviness that's going on again collectively, individually. It feels like these days we hear more bad news than we hear good. It can start to make the world feel really dark. And, this is when Shaitan really preys on our emotions and starts to make us feel like things are never going to get better and we're never going to heal. And so, always remembering that the trials that we experience are all a means for us to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, are all a means of elevating our status if we respond with patience, if we respond with inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, that you know what, we are in and out of this world. In the time that I am in this world, I'm going to do everything that I can to handle whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives me with grace, whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives me with patience. And I'm going to use those to get closer to Him. And I'm going to use those to be a better version of myself. Sometimes so many of us have been through so much trauma and have been so much pain, we might start to feel like things are never going to get better and things are never going to improve. But it's very important for us as believers to always have hope and to always know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intends good for us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intends khair for us, and that there is no pain, there is no trauma, there is no anxiety that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can't heal. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can and will heal you, inshallah. In fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can bring about a version of you that would not have come to life had you had not been broken before. And so going into Ramadan with a hopeful heart and outside of Ramadan, knowing that wherever I am, it's where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants me to be. I'm going to try to learn the lessons that He is trying to teach me in this moment. I'm going to bear it with patience. And I'm also going to make sure that I am doing my part and that I'm doing what I can to heal. And that, inshallah, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's help and my efforts combined, I can get there, inshallah. I can get to a better place. So don't lose hope.
Okay, thank you for that, Mace. I think you hit on something that's really important, and you were talking about just the fact that Allah's mercy is always around us and it's abundant. And I think it's a reminder that myself and a lot of people need to hear. But with all of this being said, do you have any resources that you want to share with everyone?
I do, absolutely. So, first and foremost, if you are somebody who has been considering therapy for the 20th time today, remember that the help of the people is the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's absolutely no shame in seeking out that help. And it actually is something that can be considered an act of worship. When you go to therapy and you say, Ya Allah, I'm doing this for your sake because I want to heal from the experiences that I've had that were maybe a little bit negative or had a negative impact on me so that I could be more focused, so that I can worship you properly. And so keep that in mind. When it comes to resources, one of the best resources that I could give is there is a website called Psychology Today. So this is a website that has all the therapists around the US. You could just put your zip code in and then you'll get all the nearby therapists and you can customize it to your liking if you want male or female, Muslim, non-Muslim, someone that speaks a specific language or somebody that takes your insurance. That's a really great resource. Project Taqwa, also on our website, we have, if you go directly to our website, we have a directory of Muslim therapists all in the state of Illinois. And then we also have a free clinic where you could have 12 sessions, again, completely free of charge. And they are very wonderful therapists over there. I will always vouch for them. And so if you're looking for short term therapy or just hoping to kind of get your toes dipped into the therapy world, that's a really great way to do that. And then I would also say if you need an assessment, there is Linden Oaks Behavioral Health in Naperville. And I believe they're in Mokina as well. They give you free assessments and they can kind of help you determine what level of care might be appropriate for you if you need inpatient, PHP, or intensive outpatient, which is completely fine. And then there are two Muslim owned private practices that I'll mention really quick that have male and female Muslim clinicians. There's Finding Your Solutions Counseling and Wellness. These are very, very wonderful people. I did half of my internship there. They were so awesome. So shout out to them. And they are actually right around the corner from the masjid. So if you're from Orland, they would be a great fit for you. And then there's also another really awesome one called Mindful Mindset Wellness Center, which is in Hickory Hills and also Naperville. And so those are some really great resources. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from you, make it easy for you if that's something that you are considering for yourself. You should definitely do it. We can all benefit from therapy, inshallah.
And I want to end by saying that any good that came from today came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and any bad or mistakes that came from today was from the shaitan. We pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts our Ramadan and that He also rewards us and allows us to enter the highest level of Jannah. Ameen. Thank you guys for joining.